were so proud because they realized that they were actually building an experience for consumers that was matching up with the Qatar Airways experience, and that was going to bring great value and choice to Australians to travel beyond Australia to the world. And I just can't be lost the importance of that to consumers, to our people, but also to the economy. Australians, roughly 11 million Australians were traveling out of Australia in pre-COVID. It's about a third of the total traffic in and out of Australia. So you need partners to be able to feed that traffic into your domestic network. People coming from outside Australia into Australia bring tourism dollars. For every dollar spent on a plane ticket, another $10 gets spent in the economy where you're traveling to. And so the knock-on benefits, it's not just jobs for Virgin Australia in Australia, it's jobs in restaurants and hotels, for small businesses who are now going to use the cargo space that's available because we've more than doubled the capacity on Qatar Airways by use of our wet lease services. It's just the benefits multiply, but it all comes down to a better experience for consumers and value and choice.
What do you say to those who have criticized the deal as Qatar Airways finding a workaround in order to get access to Australia?
I think you have to look at this from the standpoint of what it means to Virgin Australia, what it means to Australia, because the deal would not have been approved if it wasn't great for Australia. And that comes down to consumers. It comes down to the fact that Virgin Australia can't compete as well domestically if it doesn't have strong partnerships, deep equity partnerships with long-haul operators who feed in and out of Australia, because that means we can compete better for Australians who want choice for their domestic carrier to also provide international travel. With roughly half of Australians traveling every year internationally, that's what the statistics would take you to. I mean, some travel more and others travel not at all, but they want to know that their airline provides their end-to-end needs globally, not just locally. And so this is a profound impact to the Australian domestic aviation market, as well as being good for consumers and good for Virgin Australia.
Yeah. Captain Izham, I'd like to turn to you. Here we're talking about a different type of partnership between Qatar Airways and Malaysia Air. And in this case, I would describe it as a code share, an enhanced code share agreement, arrangement. And it's been in place for a few years now. When you started thinking about these types of enhanced agreements, what was the incentive? Why did it make sense?
Joumanna, let me re-pivot back to badrs, 210 airplanes. Put a bit of context. The industry today, Asia-Pacific region, command about 38% of the global capacity of the aviation industry. And Asia-Pacific is poised to attain 50% capacity global stage. Now, with issues of supply chain, late deliveries of airplanes, and the new era of aviation that we foresee in 2043 onwards, where electrification, net zero environment, different technology. So what Qatar has built over the last 30 years actually is a pivot to airlines like Malaysia Airline, a small little airline in the ASEAN region, to be participative in the global arena of aviation. So goes back to 2018, the time of when I was working with the predecessor of Badr. We see synergy, very strong synergy. Malaysia Airline, with its checkered journey, needs a very strong brand to bring Malaysia Airline up. And Qatar is the best partner. And today, as we speak, as it materializes over the last 6 years, Qatar fits all Western region. Malaysia Airline, Virgin Australia takes care of the eastern side in Oceania. As we progresses with late deliveries of aeroplane, macroeconomics, geopolitics, that makes the supply chain very unpredictable, airlines today are shouldering aging airplanes. Today, average age of 14.8 years old, airplane in a typical airline. And typically about 5 years ago, average age is about 13 years old. So the industry, the demand and supply is not balanced. There's huge demand, there's little supply because of supply chain, macroeconomics, geopolitics, and what Qatar has done to position itself to ensure that it tackles all this problem for at least the next 5 to 10 years. There are 3 phases of growth in aviation, currently next 5 years, then next 10 years. So post-2040, you're looking at the different landscape of aviation. This is an opportunity for airlines, investors. There are bottlenecks in infrastructures like airports and many more. So the synergy with Malaysia Airlines, specifically here with Qatar, has been tremendous. To us, close to 30% of our revenue comes from partnership, not only Qatar alone. And that's the model that we realize is very key and important. To a certain extent, I just had a conversation with Jane last night about working with Virgin Australia. So partnership with Qatar, with the current state of position where the industry is facing due to aging fleet, supply chain issues, is a perfect match.
What about competition? Did you feel like it was necessary to go down this route in order to be more competitive?
Yes, indeed it is. So small airlines like Malaysia Airlines, we know where we stand. And we have a long checkered journey, and we have an ambition of the future. And of course, when you go this path, competition will be intense, right? But most importantly, both partners must be committed on the vision ahead, right? And that's very important.
Engineer, let me turn back to you. So Qatar Airways, Malaysian Air, Virgin Australia, all operating on the kangaroo routes. How do you see the outlook for growth there? And was that one of the decisions, your view on how quickly this part of the world is going to be growing, was that one of the considerations you took into consideration? When you decided to go for the stake in Virgin Australia, when you decided to continue along the lines of these enhanced cooperations with other airlines?
Absolutely, Joumanna. We know, as Captain Sam said, there is a very high demand in the Far East, and we need to participate, or we need to take the opportunity to be part of this and to assist our partners. Add to this, we are restricted we have open sky agreements in Europe and in the US, while in the eastern part of the world we are limited, we are restricted by bilaterals, by a certain number of flights. So in order to create this sort of balance between East and West, we had to come up with different ideas. We had to come up with different scenarios in order to create this balance. And the best scenario was, for us, was to create this sort of partnership with the Virgin Australia, Malaysia, JAL, and the airlines, the partners that we have and operate in this part of the world.
It's interesting what Izham was saying about also the supply chain issues being a factor as well. Because of the age of some of the fleets. Do you think that this is going to push more and more consolidation within the sector or your competition to go down this route of partnerships as well?
I think, as you noticed lately, Joumanna, so many airlines are taking the path of basically trying to renovate and outfit their aircraft. They know their deliveries will continue to be delayed, and they know for them to continue to play a very strong role and to compete with other airlines, they need to take some actions. Other smaller airlines, we have noticed they keep shrinking, and bigger airlines will take their portion of the business.
Yeah. Jane, when you're thinking about these types of partnerships, we spoke about the end user, and of course you're not just thinking about passenger travel, but you also have to think about other areas of cooperation, for example, sustainability. Is that what you think can distinguish airline partnerships today? So a deeper cooperation beyond just simple commercial terms?
So I think partnership in aviation started with the knowledge that no one airline could provide a network to the world for regulatory reasons and just sheer capacity to operate that kind of scale and volume. And so you have smaller airlines and you have bigger airlines, and the smaller airlines, it's really important to partner with the bigger airlines, and that's about network and that's about customers. But the reality is that it's much more than that. It's much more than that. It is, for us, with respect to our partnership with Qatar Airways, this enables us to think much bigger. Not only to think more strategically about how we sell and market, which we're in the process of doing, but also how we leverage each other's strengths and protect each other's vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. And that's everything from sustainable aviation, that is thinking about how we manage fleet orders together, how we think about managing fuel challenges together, how we think about managing people and opportunities for people and ensure that we can attract the best and brightest, not only in our head offices, but also, in our cabin crew and pilots and all the people that work around the airports. It's a really important piece of the strategy to think very big and very strategic about how we use this as a game changer opportunity to really create sustainable long-term competitive advantage.
Captain Izham, would you like to weigh in on the other factors that should be taken into consideration beyond just the commercial when you're forging these partnerships?
You know, Joumanna, it's very important, the subject of conversation today is partnership, right? First and foremost, it must be a perfect match. And your question just now with regards to does sustainability plays an important criteria for partnership? Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Hence, it is important for partners alike, not only driving towards commercial viability, we also need to ensure that strategically, airlines, partners, Virgin Australia, Qatar, Malaysia Airlines, we must fast forward ourselves to 2040, 2050, where we committed to net zero commitment, net zero emission. So as I mentioned just now, you can divide it into 3 phases. The current 5 years, really understand what it needs for us to be in the future. The second phase, which is 2030 onwards for 5 years, that's the second 10th year. This is the portion of scaling up sustainability, self, technology, electrification, and so forth, right? Hence, partners like airlines is very key for us to propel in this direction. We must have that common understanding. Mind you, 2043 onwards, we're looking at a new era of aviation. There's potential for investors here to look at regenerating airports, air traffic management, brownfield, greenfield, and many more. So there are huge opportunities. So for partners like us, we must have that same mindset and journey, ambition moving forward, for us to be responsible to invent the next era of aviation, which I predict 2040 onwards.
Engineer, I'm going to come back to you, but Jane, I do want to point out that in a couple of weeks' time, on June the 12th, the first Virgin Australia, apologies, operated by Qatar Airways departs from Sydney to Doha. That is the inaugural flight that is part of this deal. So you must be very excited to see that happen, your brainchild, and talk us through how momentous that moment is going to be for you, and also ultimately whether the Australian consumer can be looking at lower prices for those flights.
So a couple things on that count. It's going to be an amazing day, and in part because this is a journey that we've been on for some time. The relationship between Virgin Australia and Qatar Airways is now nearly 5 years old, and we've been building that relationship, building the partnership, and we've taken it to the next level, Badr and I. And it has taken a lot of effort to get it to a place where it's been approved, because it's so good for Australia and it's so good for the consumer. And now we're about to launch our first flights, and that's going to bring a tear to the eye for many people in my team, or my former team. And this is pilots, cabin crew, engineers. This is such a special moment to again be operating long haul, and we're doing it with Qatar Airways planes and crew. But our people have come to Doha, and they're training and they're learning how to operate within the Qatar Airways operation. And so we've got secondments coming in. And it's a very significant day. That first flight brings back for Virgin Australia connectivity to the world in a new way. And so it will mean a lot to all 8,000 people who work at Virgin Australia, and the pipeline of people who are excited to come in. So it's going to be a big day and a special day. And for Australian consumers, post-COVID, I mean, most people in this room fly a lot, and you will remember how expensive it was to go anywhere. And Australia in particular, business class flights were 2.5 times what they were pre-COVID, and economy fares were over 3 times what they were pre-COVID. And getting the capacity back is what brings prices down. And that capacity was sticky coming back for supply chain reasons and a whole bunch of other logical issues that the industry faced. But bringing more capacity in brings fares down. So fares now to Europe are back where they were roughly pre-COVID, which is such a gift to the Australian community. And Australians, like most around the world, have really suffered from cost of living pressure. Inflation's been high. Wages aren't growing as fast as inflation. And so people are doing it tough. So to be able to bring a bit of optimism and opportunity to the Australian community is just phenomenal. And that's Australians wanting to go visit family and friends, let alone the rest of the world wanting to come to Australia, which then creates jobs and opportunity and optimism, again, in the tourism economy and for small businesses. So it's very exciting. It's a big couple of weeks ahead.
Sounds like it. Engineer Badr, I want to end maybe where we started, which is with your profits and record-breaking profits for last year. What does this year hold? Given there are lots of positive discussions in place, the momentum seems to be there. You obviously are feeling good about the state of the world after the big Boeing order that you made. What does this year hold in store for Qatar Airways?
You know, this year, again, we're going through the same cycle. Last year, when we announced our record profit year by achieving $1.67 billion, the stress level was very high internally on how are we going to break this record or achieve the same number.
It's even more stressed now.
Yes, especially we're having, and we're going to continue with the same problem. I hope not, but the delays in deliveries, this is the geopolitical situation which nobody can predict or can handle. However, we will go with the same approach. Our team will have to take well-studied risks in order to operate and work to newer markets, to have a better operation in newer markets. We will also try to think outside the box on how can we make more profit and increase our revenue. It is promising. This April, which is our financial year starts from April. April, again, we have recorded the best April in the history of Qatar Airways. May, we're going to record the best May in the history of Qatar Airways. From the advanced booking that we see for June and July, and I think we will from the numbers that we see, we can be comfortable to say that first quarter will be better by a big margin from the first quarter of last year. So this year is also promising for Qatar Airways. But I'm sure you have noticed in our record and in our financials that our revenue has increased by 6 to 8%, while our net profit increased to 28%. This is where we managed to get different ideas in order to increase our profits, our bottom lines.
So the outlook is looking good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to our panelists for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Tony O. Elumelu, Group Chair of Heirs Holdings and United Bank for Africa.